Space aliens. I'm down.
So tell me what you've got. You've got an app. Tell me how you got into this.
Yeah.
What is going on?
To bring it back, we could talk about how I got into Google Ads because that's the basis of the app and how everything works. So I went to school for writing and got out of school, and my first job was a grant writer for a disability services agency, and I was a grant writer for a couple of years. So you're writing grants to companies trying to get money for disability services, and I realized I was not good at that because it wasn't really about writing. It's about like kissing up to super wealthy Long Island grant makers and at events, and no one takes a 22-year-old seriously. No 65-year-old guy with $100 million is going to talk to a kid at an event. I got very frustrated with grant writing, and I decided I was going to quit and like get into construction and work with my uncle and do all the stuff. So as it happened, I worked under this guy Ken Lin, who went to write for television. He was my mentor in grant writing. He suggested that I write a grant to Google on this like Hail Mary kind of thing and to see if we could get money from Google. I gave it a shot when I was at this disability services place, and to my surprise, Google awarded us $1,000 per month for life in this thing called the Google Grant Program. And that was like pretty much the only grant I won at this place. So I didn't know what this was about because there were a lot of stipulations with the money. So I realized as I dug into this that the money could only be used for things called Google Ads, advertising, our agency. I didn't know anything about it. Used to be called AdWords. I didn't know anything about AdWords or what this was about. And my boss was really pissed off because he's like, what is this? Google. First, he was excited that we won all this money. And then he got pissed because he realized it wasn't like, actual money. It was like credit in this account to advertise with. So he's like, you did this, so you got to figure this out. And anyway, I learned by doing, learned what Google Ads was about. And I could have freedom learning what it was because it wasn't real tangible money it was just funny money. It was credit that was going into this account and you could use it or lose it. So I learned the basics of Google Ads. So Google Ads is the biggest advertising platform. It's been called the greatest business model of all time or the greatest business model of the last 100 years. I do agree with that. It's a stroke of genius in the world of marketing and in business in general. So the basic way it works is Google has amassed humanity's data. I think everybody knows that. Since the late 90s, it has a database on humanity and all of our thoughts amassed and everything we search and all of our interests and intent and our demographics and where we are and who we are and what we browse. And it's the most valuable data set of all time, according to Seth Stephens-Davidowitz, who writes some great books about Google and big data and stuff like that. I agree. Google Ads is the stroke of genius idea that was created in the year 2002, that they have this database of humanity's information and they commercialized it. So when you go on Google now, Google Ads still exists since 2002, 23 years later. If you go on Google right now and you type anything into Google, the first results you see are advertisements. Like if you type men's running shoes, you'll see these banal looking ads that don't look like they're doing any harm to anybody. They're very painless, innocuous things. Images of a sneaker, buy now, buy Adidas now, with all these compelling offers. And there are 4 results at the top of the page. Those are all ads. Those are advertisers trying to compete with each other. Again, it's a very innocuous thing, seemingly. But the system through which that's ran is called Google Ads. And there's millions of advertisers, just like the men's sneaker advertiser. There's millions of advertisers worldwide who are buying and fighting over keywords in an auction-based system. And they have access to all of the data that Google has access to, this database of humanity's information. To get that information, normally you would have to hack into a database or a server, risk prison time, whatever. You couldn't have access to that because it's extremely valuable. But for advertisers and people who run these ads, we do have access to this database. So, for example, if you're selling men's shoes, you buy keywords, men's running shoes, and you target men in a certain area of a certain demographic of a certain income who browse this website and blah, blah, blah. The only way you can have access to that is because Google hands that over when you're an advertiser. So that's a long way of saying from the grant, I learned all this stuff very slowly and the immense power of Google Ads and what was under the hood, basically this massive database. And I started a business when I was like 28 and did this for clients who would pay me to run their ads, and I amassed like 30 clients and just made money that way. And that's called search engine marketing. There's a ton of people in this industry who are the intermediary between Google and advertisers, and I did that for a long time. I still do that, but there was a turning point in 2019, and there were two things that happened. I read this book called Everybody Lies by Seth Davidowitz, who I just mentioned, which is a pretty interesting book about big data. He talks about the immense power of Google Ads for non-commercial use and essentially using it instead of selling people products and services and crap that they don't really need, using it to learn about humanity and make decisions based on that. And that kind of opened my eyes like, wow, you could, instead of buying keywords like men's shoes, you could buy keywords like I'm going to shoot up the school tomorrow or something. And instead of learning everything about a person who wants to buy shoes, you could learn everything about someone who wants to shoot up their school tomorrow, not just one person, but everybody in the world who's typing that in. Who are they? How old are they? What's their age? Yeah, what's their age, gender, their income? What websites do they browse? Who are they? What's the commonalities that they share amongst each other? There's no limit to how you could apply that. So that was kind of an eye-opener after I read that book. And then I read about this guy, Kevin Hines. I read about this article, it was soon after that. Kevin Hines, who went to the Golden Gate Bridge and he tried to kill himself.
I know this guy. He's the guy that jumped off and a sea lion saved him.
Yeah. So like
I know.
Yeah.
So inspiring this, and the sea lion is the coolest part of the story.
It pushed him up in the water, so he jumps. He wanted to kill himself and jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. He survived, broke all these bones, and then he's like going under the water, and the sea lion kept pushing him up. And
instantly regretted it as soon as he hits the air. He wanted to grab Buck. Oh, man.
Yeah, he. The first thought is he regrets it immediately. And a thing that I thought about when I read about him was he was saying like, phones weren't ubiquitous in the year 2000. So he was like, if anybody could have talked to me, said, think about this for 5 seconds, don't do this. No one talked to him on his bus ride to the bridge.
He saw that as a sign, like the fact that no one was stopping him, and there was no one to stop his line of thinking was not interrupted by any interaction. He's just by himself.
Yeah, in his mind, no interruptions, no delaying, and had no output. Oh, he jumped, and that led into the readings from Seth Davidowitz of using ads in unconventional ways. And I thought about if you could use ads to buy keywords like I'm going to kill myself or I'm suicidal or I'm going to whatever. So I was curious about that. So from 2019 until I still do this, but I started running experiments in Google Ads out of my own pocket just out of curiosity. So I started running all these campaigns instead of buying ads for clients, selling more, divorce lawyers and men's shoes and, whatever. I started running experiments for these strange keywords like I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to shoot up my school or I want to join.
Which, by the way, are those cheaper? Obviously you said that it was competitive. So people are competing over shoe, but no one's competing as much. It's almost like stocks. Like you can find a phrase that other people aren't trying to buy. And so you can, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is an auction-based system. So something like men's shoes costs like $4 a click. So Google Ads is a pay-per-click model. And that's why it's such a stroke of genius for another reason, because if you search men's shoes, like an ad can show 10 million times and the advertiser doesn't pay Google anything until you click the ad. And you show intent by clicking the ad. So yeah, if you search right now and you search men's shoes and you clicked on Adidas's ad, their headline, they have to pay Google like $4 roughly just for that, whether you bought or not, or you bounced right away, or you whatever happens, you cost them $4. It all comes down to how competitive that keyword is. So the keywords I was buying, these strange and unusual keywords, for the most part were very cheap. But some of them were competitive. The suicide terms were competitive to my surprise. And I realized that because
the CIA is definitely looking after that. They're trying to find the next person they can turn into the next, what do they call it? The freezers? No, what is it called when they make someone into the next shooter?
Grooming?
Something cell.
Sleeper cell?
Sleeper cell. I think that's it. Yeah. When they convince a guy, like the guy that shot at Trump, they say that BlackRock hypnotized him or something. I could see that being the reason.
You never know. That's a good
Yeah.
point that you never know who's behind these ads. So that's a good point. You don't know who's running them or for what purpose. So yeah, I've thought about that in great depth, and I'll come back to that in a second of like how you could use these ads, and the most powerful data set on humanity to, influence people one way or the other. So the suicide terms were expensive because I should back up a second. Sometimes you can see who is buying the keywords. So when there's a lot of auctions happening and something's very competitive, you can see everyone else who's buying the terms. And in the suicide keywords example, I could see everyone that was buying it. It's a lot of nonprofits. So a lot of nonprofits who are trying to help individuals who are suicidal and dial hotlines and all this other stuff, they were buying these keywords up. So I ran all these experiments over 6 years, targeting people who wanted to do mass shootings and commit suicide and buy drugs and see if fentanyl was in their drugs, Scientologists, people in Antarctica, prisoners, immigrants, people who were trying to flee war-torn areas of the world, and people who might have been injured by vaccines, or on and on. Just trying to see what Google would allow me to do. I attempted to do like see if you could interfere with elections in 2020 to see how easy that was to do, and that was very simple. And Wired picked that story up, and Google. I got on Google's radar, for better or worse, and they were aware of what I was doing. So because Wired blew that up and whatever, Google got pressed on that, and coincidentally, they had to make all these changes to their election stuff right after that because they got pressed in that article. I don't know how much that influenced it, but the coincidence is the timing is very close. Ran all these experiments, and I spent a lot of money on it, tens of thousands of dollars, because there's no money to be made on this stuff. You can't it's not like I'm driving traffic to a website of mine that sells men's shoes and I can recoup my costs and sell products and have margins. If I'm buying keywords like I want to shoot up my school, there's no money to be made on that. You're just doing it out of curiosity to see who these people are.
You're getting the data.
Yeah, you're getting the data. You're paying for the data. So I just did this out of curiosity and kind of just push to see what would they let me do? What would they, not just me, but like some random advertiser, like some person with money can say anything they want in an ad, by the way. So you can speak to these people however you want in the ad. There are rules and guardrails, but you can like kind of influence people one way or the other in these ads. And that's very shocking and disturbing because Google Ads is so successful for many reasons, but it works because the ads are very influential, even if people feel like they're not. It's not just the messaging that's influential, it's all the data that's back behind it. It's not even advertising, it's just simply answering a question. Things have changed in the last few years a little bit with AI and stuff. That's another
Yeah.
side.
Before I forget, I want to, because it sounds like you would know the answer to this question. When we see targeted ads, so I am talking to you in the locker room, I say something about guitars, and then I see the ad on Facebook or whatever on my phone. Now, so that means that my phone heard me and gave me the ad. However, when it's hearing me say things throughout my day, is that information accessible? And how accessible is that information? Because if a shoe company can access the fact that I said shoe, then can the CIA access the fact? I mean, that's a whole different example, but like, can some nefarious organization overhear me discuss my private information throughout the day? Like, how vulnerable are we?
Yeah. So the first question about like are companies listening is the most common question that advertisers are asked, and I've been asked that 100 times, and it's one of the most hotly debated, controversial questions in digital marketing, whether devices are listening. And I have my own opinions about it, but you will never get any of these companies to admit that they do listen passively. They deny it, and they have explanations for it. I have no proof that, other than anecdotally, that anything listens passively. I've tried different experiments, like talking to my wife and stuff about really obscure things to see if ads could trigger. We've talked about some absurdly obscure things in conversation and saw ads about it later that can't just be coincidence or explained away. But the short answer is their explanation is that the system is inferring based on, I'm just going to speak about social media and how they explain it, that the system infers based on your close connections and what they're liking and searching. So that's different than talking about it, but we have had weird instances where we're talking passively about like World War II medals or something like that. Something absurdly
Yeah.
niche, and then you see it later. And yeah, their explanation is that would be, if they were pressed on it, social media companies, was that my wife is searching for this stuff, and because we have a close connection on social, we're married on social media, that I would see stuff, assuming that I would want to get her a gift in that area. That's their explanation, that it's due to like very powerful data and inference from close
Yeah.
relationships. But
Bullshit.
yeah, it's impossible.
I've seen people do it live. They're
Yeah.
talking about something. They're filming their computer, their other phone on like Facebook Marketplace, and they're talking about laundromats, something obscure, and they refresh it, and boom, laundromats. Like it's clearly for legal purposes they have to bullshit us, but there's
Yeah.
clearly it's seemingly beyond what we're saying. It's almost like there's mind reading technology. It's crazy.
From my experience in being in this industry for almost 20 years and my own anecdotal experiences, I would put a bet on them listening passively, and that they just can't admit it, because there is an enormous amount of money, obviously, to be had just from them listening passively, because the ads would be so much more relevant to, and capture all the intent that you have when you're not actually searching. Like, just for an example, real quick, Google has gone to immense lengths to realize something called multi-channel attribution, which is a fancy way to say, multi-device attribution. It's a fancy way to say, like, they have spent years and tons of money trying to figure out when you go from, and they've gotten really good at this, but it was the holy grail of their efforts for a long time, figuring out when you search for one thing on your cell phone, and then you go on your tablet and continue your shopping journey, and then you go on desktop, and then you go into a store, and your conversion path is very long. They've spent,
Watch.
yeah. Then any device you have now, it's pretty seamless, but that was a huge thing they tried to crack and trying to figure it out, and they tried some really like Orwellian things to try to figure it out and track people in stores with sensors and all these different things. Now they've realized that, and if you do all your shopping journey in 4 different devices, they advertise, or somebody running the ad can see it. So imagine that they've spent so much time and money trying to figure out something like that, when a whole major piece of the pie is like being able to listen to somebody passively, and all the money that's involved with that. I would assume that they're absolutely doing that, and they're just so
I mean, now we're at the stage where our washing machine, our refrigerator. I saw a guy had a vacuum that he found out was emitting Wi-Fi signals. It's like the Orwellian is an understatement.
It's
Orwell
psychotic.
had no clue how far it would go, and how I willingly put this thing on my wrist. I willingly have AI listening to me all day. It's fucking insane.
That's what Orwell didn't foresee, as a visionary as he was, an amazing visionary. He never foresaw that we would willingly put the put the devices on us and be part of that ecosystem. But here we are. So and it's led to some depraved outcomes for sure. So back to those experiments. I ran all those experiments out of my own curiosity, spent a shit ton of money just seeing what I could do and seeing how far you could push it, and see what Google was willing to give the everyday person. And that led to my last experiment. So it's an app called Above Us, and it's my investigation into people who have UAP experiences. So this started like a year and a half ago. I'm a big fan of sci-fi since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I saw this movie called Fire in the Sky, which traumatized my whole life and probably has led a whole generation of kids, millennials, older millennials, into therapy and major issues. But my experience with Fire in the Sky, I was like 8 years old, and ABC, it was like, here's the family movie, Fire in the Sky, and very, hokey movie.
That.
At like 8 o'clock, I'm alone and watching this movie, and the movie is so messed up because it's so insidious, and it's misleading because it's like a courtroom drama for like an hour and 20 minutes. It's like it's like a mysterious drama, and I was like half paying attention. I'm like, this is cool. How does this have to do with aliens besides the beginning? And I'm like, and then the last 10 minutes, the guy has, Travis Walton's actor, he goes into like a family gathering, and they're having food, and he gets hit with like a syrup. He goes into the table, the syrup hits him, and he has a complete flashback. And then it's just like that just completely leveled the whole generation of kids who
We
got lured in.
lived through the most insane, I don't want to call it propaganda, like the specials we would see. There would be unsolved mysteries,
Yeah.
X Files. We were inundated as young Americans with scary alien shit. The
Yeah.
idea was aliens are horrifying. Never, very, very rarely were we ever met with the concept of a plausible alien idea, which would be that they're benign and sort of their relation to us is the same that we have with animals. Because it doesn't match up. If they're that sinister and nefarious, we would be in a different situation. They could easily just do these nefarious things to us. They wouldn't do it to one guy. So it just doesn't add up. But the idea that I think that we'd rather be scared with a horror film than be met with the concept that there's a superior being that is to us what we are to monkeys. I think that idea bothers us so much. And that's why when we watch Star Trek and all these sci-fi films, it's a guy that's a white American dude, and then every other alien is subsequent is inferior to him somehow. That we can bear with. We can bear with Captain Kirk is the American dude, and then the aliens are like less than him somehow. I just coincidentally all resemble
Yeah.
a different race of people. There's always a
Yeah.
planet of Jews, always a planet of black dudes, and it's like we hate the idea that aliens are these like. I don't want to just say superior. They're more than just superior, but it's like that bothers us.
Yeah. Yeah. You're speaking almost, yeah, like there's an arm of ufology that like the stuff that we were exposed to, our generation was like a form of soft disclosure and all, that's a whole like well traversed arm of ufology that, yeah, that was all like manufactured. Yeah, that's another conversation, but we did have a plethora of a robust library of great sci-fi that did come out of whatever angle that was coming from, and Fire in the Sky was one of those that I saw, and loved Star Wars. I still love the original Star Wars, and that I was obsessed with when I was a little kid, and just loved all different sci-fi stuff. So I've always been fascinated by UFOs, and as I ran these experiments, as I'm getting older, my dad passed away when I was a kid, and he was really into aviation and aeronautics. He worked for Grumman and Fairchild in Long Island and helped build the F-14 and the lunar module, and is a really smart guy in engineering. And he died when I was so young, I didn't like learn about who he was until I was older and pieces came together. So every year I go out with his friends from Grumman. We go to this diner in Queens, and tell stories about how Grumman was back then and the things they worked on. And it's pretty incredible how they operated. These guys were no computers, just like partying pretty hard, because that was the 70s and 60s and 70s, and they'd go out and Mad Men style and drink and go nuts, and then come back and design some of the most amazing aircraft, with one eye open and writing on blueprints and designing incredible stuff. It's always fun to go out with them and hear these things. But I've always been, I'm not as into planes like my dad was, or aviation, to be honest. But the sci-fi stuff and trying to learn more about my dad as I got older, kind of segued into this idea for this app. So I started running experiments 2 years ago, buying keywords like I saw a UFO and I saw a UAP and report a UFO and report a UAP, just out of curiosity, just like all my other experiments. So the idea is, when anyone anywhere in the United States searches I saw a UFO or a UAP or report either of those things, the ad shows up just like it would if somebody searches men's shoes. The ad shows up and something called an impression accrues. So an impression is terminology in digital marketing, but that's when an ad is triggered. So if you're on your phone, you search men's shoes, the ad shows up, but you don't click necessarily. It just shows up. That's an impression. So I had this idea. If you could output impressions to a system, you'd basically have a heat map of, like, you could output a heat map to anyone who wanted access to it of what people are searching. I realized, instead of running these campaigns and keeping it in an ecosystem in Google, you could output it to like a website and like share in real time with anyone who might have been interested, where people are telling Google that they want to report a UAP UFO. The idea being that you could have a heat map of where sightings are most prevalent. So that was the the basis of this idea. And I used this setup through Google Data Studio and just kind of threw this together in my own website, and it was ad hoc and not very professional. So I teamed with this app team to make it very professional. And I don't know anything about building apps. That's not my world. So this company called Broken Reality, these great guys who are some of my friends, we worked together and built this app called Above Us. So it's just the same idea. It's outputting Google Ads impressions to a database, a Google Data Studio, and then that outputs to an app. So in other words, if somebody searches, I saw a UFO, in the next minute, it's going to populate in Google Data Studio, and then it goes to the app, and then it's in real time in the app, and you could see a heat map essentially of where people are searching. And a cool feature that we worked on was you can overlay like nuclear sites and military sites, and you can see sightings over time and stuff like that. Yeah, and that's where we're at. And there is a company called Enigma who has a pretty incredible app in the UFO space, and it's a similar app to mine, and it's been around before mine, but Enigma relies on user reports. I don't do any of that. So it relies on people going into the app. I saw this UFO, they write down what happened, they take a picture or a video, and then it populates in the map. The way I try to differentiate this app is it's based on impressions. So you don't have to people don't have to sit there and like fill out a report and take pictures and have this whole lengthy thing. All they have to do is search on Google, and passively the system picks up the impression, and then it's on the map. So that's where we're at. And the question I get a lot is, what is the end game of this? What is the point of this? One, it's out of curiosity. And the second is it honestly is a proof of concept, because what I want to show is the immense capability of being able to essentially output Google's data to anyone who wants it anywhere else. And that is what I'm trying to get across more than anything with UFOs or ufology, or any point I'm trying to make with sightings, or that's takes a backseat to this proof of concept. And what I mean by that is, if you think of the implications of being able to output someone's Google searches, humanity's Google searches, there is an immense power to that, and no one does this. Either they don't know how to do it, or it's a money issue, or there's no return on investment. Those are two problems. There's no money to be made on this, really, in most situations. And a lot of advertisers don't think of using ads outside of commercial applications. So anyway, here's some use cases that could, real quick, out of this app, that if you could just, like, this doesn't have to be limited to UFO reports or sightings. You can have people who are telling Google about abductions. You could have a heat map of abductions throughout the world if you wanted, and have an app on that, or have a data overlay with abductions. If you wanted to make a shit ton of money on something like this, here's a free idea for anybody. You could just pick a community that will go to whatever length to get data on something they really care about. One example is like birders. I don't know much about birding. It's not my thing, but I know friends who are birders, and they spend all this time trying to find this rare bird in certain areas. And from what I understand from these friends of mine, these birders will go to such great lengths to get data on certain birds before anybody else. So you could just forget the UFO idea. Just build a campaign that targets, just get a list from ChatGPT of the rarest birds in the United States, build a campaign and buy all those keywords, and then output that to a map and sell the data. $10 a month in an app for anyone who wants to see, where is this? I saw this bird. They get a heat map. They get push notifications when a bird is seen in their area in real time, and they can go see it before it's gone, or see it before their other birder friend. Anyway, I'm sure people are willing to pay for that. I'm not going to do it because I'm not passionate about that, and I don't have enough time.
Yeah, but just as an example. Yeah.
It's just an example. And my last example of a proof of concept, if you just zoom out and think of the broader implications of being able to output Google searches in real time. Imagine you wanted to know the secrets that an entity, or like a country or city, a government is hiding from its citizens or the world. You don't have to take their word for it. You don't have to take the news's word for it, or the media. You can literally just buy, like, you could geo-target that area, buy all the keywords that you want the truth about, and just get the data of people who are searching those things and learn the truth from the citizenry itself, instead of relying on anyone telling you one way or the other.
Yeah.
I think of that. Yeah.
Are there any patterns that have emerged from, I mean, you've had this for a while now. And so one of the patterns that people say in this sort of UFO concept is, oh, well, why is it that in the US there are so many UFO sightings? Why is it that, in certain other countries there are fewer? And have you noticed any clear patterns? Obviously, in the Amazon jungle, people don't have as much access to Google, so that would explain one correlation. But is there any overall grand patterns we could say? Obviously, I think U.S. is the most prevalent, right?
Yep. Yep. And I should have mentioned one of the limitations of the app that we are working on is it is only targeting the US.
Okay, so yeah.
But I
But
do
is there
know,
like we could say specific states have
yep,
more than
but I
yeah.
do know that the most searches come from the US. However, yeah, the reason it's only the US is purely a financial limitation because I run this out of my own pocket. I have no investors or grants or anything like that. I built this app just out of my own pocket out of curiosity. I don't monetize it in any way, but it comes back to the cost associated with it. It's still pay-per-click advertising, and not everyone clicks the ads when they search, I saw a UFO. But when they do click, I owe Google money and I owe them a bill at the end of every month for all these people who are searching this stuff. It's purely a limitation of funds because if I expand this outside of the US, I'm going to get way more clicks. And
Right, right.
I spend like $500 a month on the ad clicks in the US alone. And the top 10,000 cities in the US alone, which I should have mentioned, it's not the whole US currently because of financial limitations. If I expand it to the whole US, we're looking at like $1,500 a month. If I went worldwide, probably 10 grand a month,
Okay.
just
Well,
assuming how many people search.
out
But
of what you do have access to, what are the patterns we can see? Are there particular states? Are we seeing more in the countryside, more in the city? Like, is there any
yeah,
overall pattern we can
yeah.
see?
So they do follow populations right now, and there are when the whole thing happened in New Jersey with the drone situation, that
Oh
was
yeah.
that was really interesting, and the app team kind of went crazy about this. They were really excited about this. I was too, because the app launched, and it was just purely a coincidence that that New Jersey thing happened right after. So it was kind of interesting seeing, searches happen throughout New Jersey in areas that weren't necessarily tied to population. So another limitation, and I'm being honest about the app's limitations because it's a work in progress. But another limitation of the app, and one of the biggest criticisms that I do get is that it's not normalized by population. So you're touching on that right now about normalizing by populations. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a heat map as it is because obviously the areas with the highest populations, you're going to see the most searches. What you want to do is if you see like a place in the middle of nowhere and I don't know, Idaho, a little zip code that has a ton of searches relative to like Manhattan, you would want the heat map to be concentrated. You'd want to draw people's attention to Idaho on the heat map versus New York City. But as it is now, it almost mimics a population map, except in examples like in New Jersey. And that's something we're working on. It's a really hard lift to pull this off because you have to normalize all the searches by population in every area, and that introduces some complex data in the flow of things, and we haven't done that yet. But that's where we'd like to get, where we see a small zip code that has a lot of searches compared to like a huge city,
Yeah.
and we that gets emphasis. Right now, that's not part of the app, but we're working towards that, and it's a great question, and probably the one of the biggest lifts to pull off, but it would greatly improve the people trying to investigate areas that are smaller and population that have higher sightings relative to like our
Right.
cities and whatever. But yeah,
In today's age, we're now at the point where I could type into the AI, make me a UFO thing where some cow gets abducted. And we're at the uncanny stage of technology where we can actually. There was a time where everyone had a phone, everyone could take a video, but now we're at the point where it came full circle to where now we can't believe footage anymore. So one thing I like to do is look in the past and see what are the most convincing videos, and especially anything that was mistakenly recorded by NASA or any space organization, especially when they show that they're like sort of defensive about it. And the best example I can provide of footage of a UFO, if I were going to bet on UFO footage being real, and I want to show this real quick, and I'll see if you have any, if you have your favorite UFO video. So this is, have you seen the Columbia tether video?
no,
Okay, so this is an experimental prototype that NASA was creating. And can you see this on the screen? Yeah. So NASA was experimenting. This is a tether, which was supposed to absorb energy in the atmosphere. It was supposed to take energy from our atmosphere in order to propel devices. And it was this experimental prototype, and it broke from the Columbia space shuttle or something like that. I forget the details on the actual space flight. And accidentally, the footage of this test resulted in thousands of UFOs being caught on camera. They all have a uniform shape. They all are pulsating. And the cool thing about this is that this, and I'm going to play it in a second, but this is the tether. This is the human artificial prototype called the tether. And we know the size of it. And so because the ships go in front of it and behind it, we can use it as a ruler. And because NASA was clearly defensive about it, they gave all these crazy excuses. They said it was dust. They said it was like dust on the camera. It's even more credible. So I'm going to play this real quick and see what you think.
You guys getting the image?
Franklin, we see a long line, a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
Well, the long line is a tether, and there's a little bit of debris that kind of flies with us, and it's illuminated by the sun at such low angle. So there's a lot of stray light, and it's getting washed out quickly, but Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
In that description by the crew, this is the tether in the satellite. The satellite with approximately 12 miles of tether still attached to it. Columbia and the satellite now just passing over the west coast of northern Africa. The two spacecraft now 90 nautical miles apart. Controllers for the satellite did have communications with it during the close pass between Columbia and the satellite.
You can look at that video themselves. To me,
what year was that?
That's in 1993 or something. Early 90s or late 80s. But and there's clearer videos than that. That was some guy's spin-off, But that video and other videos where NASA mistakenly, because NASA used to play stuff live, and they used to get caught with UFOs. There's all these early 90s, late 80s footage where they're live streaming footage, and accidentally a ship goes on. They shut the stream off. They give some crazy excuse, and then we don't hear about it. To me, those are the best examples, because if you give me a video from yesterday, I don't know. Someone could create a drone, even if it's not AI, someone can make a UFO these days. But when it's from the 90s and the 80s, prior to any serious CGI, that is the golden era for UFO footage.
I agree with that. It's you got to look in the past to I don't believe anything I see anymore that can possibly that gets into a larger conversation about feeling the futility of doing anything artistically either. But I totally hear you on that. And I never saw that video. I definitely want to take another look at that.
It's called the Columbia Tether Prototype. And there's a longer video that anyone can watch, and a lot of people have investigated it. Another thing, since you mentioned you have a connection to Grumman, I do as well. I had a parent that worked for Grumman, and there was this big thing called Disclosure Project in the early noughties, led by Stephen Greer. And it was basically 20 high-ranking officials, such as astronauts, Apollo astronauts, colonels, the assistant for Wernher von Braun. All of these people with credentials presented their testimony. And some of them had just the most amazing. One guy basically was in charge of a nuclear silo, had footage of a UFO comes, zaps the silo, makes a nuclear weapon turn into a cylinder of metal, and then flies away. Wernher von Braun's assistant tells this story about almost everything she said has turned out to be true. She's like, and Wernher von Braun, if anyone doesn't know, father of rocketry, high-ranking Nazi scientist who in Operation Paperclip was hired, and we absorbed him along with many other brilliant Nazi scientists. By the way, I'm not glorifying Nazi Germany for legal purposes, and this is just educational, academic information I'm expressing. But Wernher von Braun's assistant said that on his deathbed, he would tell her,
taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids. Against asteroids, we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over...
Making space weaponry. And what do we have now? We have a space force. We have literal space lasers. People, you see that, people glaze over like you're nuts. We actually do have space lasers, as crazy as that sounds. And it's like, we did sort of go through everything she predicted. But the problem I found was, because I had my own experiences that I won't go too deep into, but I had a reason that I wanted to reach out and find out who else is involved with the UFOs. I found this disclosure project. It seemed to be the most credible testimony. And I contacted the guy, Stephen Greer. His credentials was his uncle or his grandfather worked for Grumman. And so I'm like, oh, I have something in common with this guy. I find out more about him, and he's holding these like seminars, and they're charging like $3,000 for the seminars. I'm getting these newsletters that are very culty. It turned out to be very culty. Stephen Greer was making these big claims that he is able to contact aliens by meditating, and he can teach you how to meditate and talk to the aliens if you give him $5,000. And it just, there was always a grift every month.
There's a lot of grifters, man.
Dude, if I had
Huge
the money,
amount of grifters.
if I had the money, I would have gave it to him because I needed answers. I had seen something. I want answers. I want a community too. And so they seem to have been, I believe some of the testimony in Disclosure Project. However, and I don't think Stephen Greer is an evil guy, but in my experience, he was definitely making a business out of this and exploiting. And there's a lot of mentally ill people in this arena as well. And so it just seemed to not be. It was a dead
video.
end.
This is I forget, Night Shift podcast. Like Clint Weldon. He played this video with Stephen Greer. Like that. Whatever we pay, like $5,000. You go on this retreat thing, and it was a whole. It's so ridiculous. Like seeing it from the outside. I can't bring it up now, but like I'll send it to you. It's so ridiculous. You could just tell in 2 seconds. It's you want to believe. So he takes you to the beach, and you're looking at. He'll point to something and be like, yeah, that's a UFO, and that's it. And like everybody, I'm the only one who can film. Put your phones away.
Right.
And a lot of, a lot of control, like a cult-like, like you said, a lot of cult-like language.
There was levels. There were like packages. Like if you have $5,000, you get to be like a headmaster.
Right. Yeah.
I'm so lucky I didn't have any money.
Once there's like tiers involved. And
Dude, if I had any money, I would have gave it to them. I'm so lucky I was broke. But as someone, you see this phenomenon and you want answers. And I definitely think some of the testimony, I don't know which testimony is real, which one is, because just because someone has credentials doesn't mean they're not crazy. Someone can be in the Army, in the Air Force, in NASA, and have mental issues, be narcissist, be broke. A lot of astronauts are fucking broke. You come up with some grift or whatever. And so I get it. I don't know that everything that I saw on the Disclosure Project is real. However, I know Stephen Greer was exploiting this thing. And so I'm not trying to badmouth.
That's one where it's pretty clear that, like that once you're talking about subscription models where it's like Cutco, where you got to like get in like, get on the ground floor to see this level. And that's like the greatest challenge, man. And to bring it back on a higher view, like having created this app, people have a ton of questions that my personal views on like a certain video or theology or a segment or arm of ufology, or if this guy's I just did this out of curiosity, and I know as much as the mildly I'm not a scholar in ufology by any means. I'm just as curious as anybody, and I am so cynical about the whole thing. I have people that I believe just from gut reactions. One thing about me is I'm really good at reading people just because of my own upbringing without my dad and stuff. And I could read my mom really well. And I was very attuned to like emotions when I was a little kid. And that like carried through to my adult life. But I feel like I can pick up on like bullshit pretty well. So there's people that like just give me a nasty feeling in this ufology space. But and I'm not going to name names or whatever, but there's people I believe, and maybe I shouldn't believe, and I come in and out of this stuff. I got a lot going on, and I'm, the UFO experiment with this app is not my only thing I'm working on, so I get really into it. Then I come out of this ufology space for a couple months. I come back in, and it's so hard to keep up with what's going on. It's like a daily, like this guy Clint Well, the Night Shift, great podcast about the ufology space. He's on it more than anybody that I know, but it's a daily. You got to be in it daily, and I'm not interested in that.
There is a mountain of bullshit.
It's a mountain of bullshit,
And
grifters, a lot of mental illness, like you said, and people
it's
want answers.
like religion. And yeah, it's just like religion if you want it to be. There's delusional people, there's narcissists, there's people lying to get money. So it's exhausting when you're into this stuff because to actually sift through, like Bob Lazar has credentials, he's a scientist, he has all the credentials to prove that he had. And then, then there's certain things that I saw from him. I've seen people, come with their own criticisms of him. So even a guy like that, where he's actually a scientist, he actually did work for the government.
Yep.
It's still,
Bob Lazar is the one that,
no.
Yeah, Bob Lazar, his story got me into this from like a sci-fi fan to like, really like, okay, thinking about this a little more. His story is so compelling. He's a likable guy. The bullshit meter for me doesn't go off like it does. Look, I talked about Fire in the Sky. It's all right if we name a name here. I don't believe Travis Walton. It's not that it's just a gut reaction. That's all I can go by because that's all I've got. And there's so much information that it's just so time consuming and trying to figure out whose angles. But Bob Lazar doesn't set off those alarms for me. And like you said, all the stuff with S4 and the people vouched for him and how he went back and knew the place like the back of his hand and knew people and was buzzed in.
He brought witnesses. He brought people and saw it.
Yeah. And if anyone, he's the one that I would believe, and he seems genuinely stressed out. I know that Joe Rogan podcast, those headaches were kind of seemingly convenient, but the dude genuinely seemed like he didn't want to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's always a good sign when someone doesn't want to go into it. Because if you really experience that, you don't want to grift, you don't want to come up with a business plan. And that is a good symptom that he's actually telling the truth. And he actually has the qualifications. He's actually a scientist. So not everyone can fake that. I think as far as like abduction stories, Betty and Barney Hill seems to be the most credible thing. Basically, the credible part is that Betty drew a constellation and said that the aliens said that that's where they come from. And then they were like, oh, well, that constellation doesn't exist. And then it turned out like 20 years later, telescopes got strong enough to see that constellation. That's a verifiable thing. It's hard to believe because it's so extreme. And then the other thing that I think as far as credible people is the really famous people that have seen UFOs, because then it's like, okay, if UFOs were going to give someone attention, there's probably a reason. So when John Lennon says, despite his drug use, when John Lennon says that he saw UFOs, it's like, okay, well,
yeah.
If I was an alien, I'd probably be more interested. David Bowie said he saw one. The guy that was in, what's his name? Where Is My Mind band?
Pixies, right?
Pixies. He saw one. The guy that discovered Pluto, the astronomer, said he saw one. There's certain guys where it's like, okay, if I was an alien, I'd go after you because if I was an alien, I wouldn't really care about what scientists were thinking about as much. The smartest guy on Earth would bore me compared to John Lennon as an alien because when we watch animals, we're entertained by the qualities they possess that we don't have. A penguin has qualities that we don't have, so it's entertaining. So I can imagine they would be fascinated with artists more so than just a guy that's good at math. They're better at math, so they don't really care who's good at math.
That's interesting. Yeah, there was another arm of ufology that says that certain people attract these experiences and have multiple experiences. And another that says, like, the more you put out about this, the more it comes to you. Like, yeah, that's another whole thing. Like, maybe creative people put it out there, this creative energy that opens up some kind of like DMT wormhole where whatever aspect of consciousness we don't understand is bringing them closer, and our artists are more in tune with that or something. But the Betty and
That's the
Barney
other
Hill thing,
thing.
coming back to that, yeah. One of the best vacations my wife and I went on last summer, we went to the Betty and Barney Hill site where that
New
abduction.
Hampshire.
Yeah, it was the White Mountains. It was a lot of fun and very interesting, and it's kind of funny because there's like little gas station. There's like a gas station that there's nothing there. It's like you're in between the woods on this road in the White Mountains, and you get like real Twin Peaks vibes up there. It's kind of a weird area, and then a little gas station that sells just a ton of alien shit like tchotchkes and stuff. And then what's really cool is you can go up this giant like fire tower, and then you overlook all of the woods and the whole site. So we went there last summer, and I wanted to go there because it's a really great book I recommend about that called The Interrupted Journey, I think it's called. Pretty obscure book. Like, I never hear anybody talk about it, but it was pretty amazing. It's basically just the guy who hypnotized Betty and Barney Hill. It's his transcripts. It seems a little like exploitive, but it's another story. But it's literally, the book is just their transcripts with the guy, the hypnotist. So he recorded all the stuff, and then it's transcribed into the book. So you could see everything they spoke about and how their stories correlate, even when they were in different rooms. And it goes into how Barney Hill was this no-nonsense kind of guy, which makes the story even more compelling because he was like this really sober-minded guy and wanted nothing to do with any weird stuff and had no tolerance for it. And he had this whole story, and he's saying certain things, and they're kept separate, according to the book. They're kept separate, and they're telling the same stories about what happened on the craft. And supposedly Betty was given this like gift, this like one of the aliens gave her this parting gift, and they're walking through the woods, and this like the another alien saw that she had been given this and reprimanded the alien who gave it to her and said, "You can't give this to her, like, what are you doing?" So, and then yeah, she had to point to him. Oh yeah, there was another one where she got off this bed. She was they like put this probe through her belly button, and it hurt her a lot, and then she kind of yelled, and then they soothed her with, you hear about this a lot with like people who have experiences that they're like soothed telepathically.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I've heard that where like just with the mind they're soothed through
And that used to seem insane. Right now, humans have telepathic technology. You can look this up, guys. There's like 10 companies. It's like headphones. You put it on the guy's head. You can see what's in his head now. You can hear the narration of his voice. So the idea of telepathy is like, we have it now. Think about the implications. It's fucking scary to think about. But like, everything we used to think was insane. We have drones now. We got telepathic shit. It all seems more plausible.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's like the remote viewing thing, which I want to get to in a second. But like, yeah, that with when they had this, she gets the belly button probe. She's in a lot of pain. She's soothed by this entity, and then her pain goes away, and she's calm. And the same thing happened supposedly when they were driving in New Hampshire, the White Mountains. They see this craft. Betty was like, "Oh my God, this thing's following us." And Barney's the sober-minded guy. He's like, "Enough with this stuff. Let's just get home. It's like a satellite. I've had enough of this." They were driving back from Niagara Falls. They're very tired. And then they pulled over and they wanted to see, and Barney wanted no part of it. So he did go out eventually, and he was struck with such immense fear. He ran back to the car. He's like, "We got to go." And then he was soothed at some point, like from the craft. Again, that happened just like when she was in the craft with when they were doing that thing with the belly button, and anyway, after that, they looked at a map, and she asked, "Where are you from?" supposedly. And then this entity said, "Well, do you know where you are in the scheme of this?" And she's like, "No." And then he's like, "Well, I'm not going to tell you about us because you don't know where you are." So anyway, that's
cheeky, these aliens.
What's that?
These aliens are cheeky.
Yeah, they're being scumbags a little bit. So yeah,
smug.
Smug guy. So then she was given this parting gift, and yes, and that they were in the woods. That's where they were led and stopped in the road and all that stuff. So yeah,
it was Zeta Reticuli is the constellation.
That's right. Yeah,
and another thing that would make sense is like it was a black and white interracial couple. And if I was an alien, just like we're interested in a liger, like I'm not comparing black people to lions, by the way, but like, the idea of like sort of genetic diversity and hybrid vigor, that would be fascinating to another species. If they were studying us the way we study animals, they would be highly fascinated with interbreeding interracial couples. I want to use the right woke language without using the improper nomenclature. But yeah, I'm mixed myself, by the way. So it's slightly mixed. And so I'm not trying to be racist here, even though I am mildly racist. It would make sense that they would want to go, there's a black and white couple. Let's see.
Yeah.
I don't know. That makes it a little bit more credible. The other thing, it's like, okay, if we, aside from whether or not they're real, if we accept that they're real, then we can think about the implications. If they are real, they don't seem to get very involved. And that is mirroring the way we often interact with nature when we're being responsible. Irresponsible, immoral men do interfere with nature, but a naturalist, a guy that is being moral and sort of respecting nature doesn't get involved. When you see two monkeys fighting, you don't break the fight up and say, hey guys, you should be like humans. Here is a car. Here are clothes. You don't just incorporate them into civilization. Some people do. Some people do dress up monkeys and teach them sign language. But, for the most part, they're respectful things. So it makes sense that they would be sort of hands off. But it comes to the point where humanity has done so many brutal things that it's almost like, should they stop us a little bit? Like, maybe it's time. Maybe now that, World War III might be here already, maybe it's time that they made an announcement. Maybe if they just like said, hey guys, you guys are being a bit odd. Could you stop shooting each other and bombing children? Just like an announcement, a sort of godly announcement would really help. But it seems like they don't want to get involved,
Yeah, that's makes me think of what book did I read Lou Elizondo's book, Imminent, and he goes into this whole thing where there's like a divisive two trains of thought about what they're up to with these nuclear facilities, because I think by now it's almost been proven that there were these two incidents where these craft interfered with a nuclear facility and shut it down, and then in another facility they activated the launch codes. That was like two different supposedly documented incidents.
Right.
And Lou Elizondo tries to investigate what the two different lines of thinking about that. What are the two different ethos about what that could mean? And there's the cynical or whatever thought process that they are trying to just test our capabilities before the armada comes and wipes us out, and just trying to feel us out. And then the more hopeful line of thinking that they're trying to warn us or get us to think about what we're doing.
My theory is that they're mostly hands-off and neutral, because the same reason you wouldn't go back. Imagine just going back 50 years and meddling. If you went back into World War II and gave someone some secrets like, hey, don't do that, and this is what, you'd fuck up the complete timeline. That's number one. And then, so like just interfering with our development would sort of hinder us. Like I said, if you give monkeys clothes, you're stunting them. And so the other thing, I think that there's, just like we have vegans and animal rights activists that care a bit more, I think they have that equivalent, and some of them care more about us than the other ones. And I have this funny image in my head of like an alien that cares about humans more, and his dad is like, hey, at the dinner table, like, stop being a pussy, bro. It's like the same way when the son's trying to quit meat, he's trying to be a vegetarian, and the dad's like, hey, don't be such a fucking liberal over here. I think there's like liberal aliens that are like, we should help them. We gotta stop.
Definitely a gamut. Yeah, why do we think of all of them having this uniform beliefs? Yeah, there's definitely like there's emo aliens. There's like
hardcore Nazi
old school
aliens.
Hardcore. There's new metal. There's like turnstile guys.
New metal aliens.
There's new metal. There's butt rock aliens. It's I mean, I've never personally had any experience. I had like a stepfather figure when I was a kid who claimed he had this experience in Seaford, and he did smoke a lot of pot, but weed doesn't really, I don't know.
Yeah, that's not
I don't
enough.
know about weed making you, but he said in the 70s, yeah, this craft came and the whole neighborhood came out and Seaford, and he didn't bullshit about stuff. Like he was a
Yeah.
wild guy, but didn't no bullshit, no nonsense. And he said like all the neighborhood came out. This craft hovered for a while.
I mean, that's not even there. There are confirmed multiple sightings. So the Phoenix Lights, thousands of people saw it. Thousands of people got it on tape. The governor, everyone looked this up. The governor himself first makes a speech mocking the situation. An alien, a guy dressed up as an alien, comes out. They laugh about it. Later on, when he was no longer the governor, he goes on the news and says, "Feds showed up, told me you need to deny this. This didn't happen. You need to calm everyone down." And he's like, I know for a fact that this was an extraterrestrial craft.
See what it is.
I believe it was something from the U.S. government that they were kind of flying around.
No, it wasn't even close to a B. It was much bigger than a B-1. A B-1 actually isn't that big. I mean,
right.
If it's at low altitude, it'll appear big, but no, this was totally different.
Something, though, that you think our own government may have been kind of running by a populated area to see what would happen?
Well, they certainly achieved their goal of stirring the pot, if that's what they were doing, but I don't think so. I think this was technologically far advanced.
It's embarrassing for me to admit this. It's not my world. I don't get any money from this. The feds told me to lie about it. It's like, that's just one example. We have these examples where like tons of people saw a craft, and then all you got to do is look at the government reacts to it. When the government is denying it, that's when I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to this. If the government admits to it, that's when I'm like, nah, not a chance.
Yeah, that's how far we've come, where it's like between AI and it's impossible. Yeah, just like not related, but definitely related. Yeah, the phone just drives me completely crazy now. I last like 20 minutes on the phone before I feel like I'm going insane. Just with the development in AI, videos I can't tell are real, the futility, I went to school for writing. I've been wanting to write a novel for 18 years now and tried in various ways and probably wrote 5 of them and getting better each time, but it's still my goal. But now I'm facing this weird world where there's going to be a turning point with the creative, with the arts, where people could just be like, yeah, that's the AI wrote that. You're not going to know.
That's the thing. That's a good point. It's
insane.
not just the fact that AI can do what you want it to do. It's the fact that now no one knows if you even did it. And so I can write
a book now. Yeah, you read a book.
I can make a song with AI.
I don't know how much is real. I don't know.
Yeah. So the uncanny valley, that's a good point. It's not even just on the artist side. It's on the audience side. You don't even get the credit because they don't know if you sang the song. You can type in, make this song in my voice. And it's like that uncanny valley thing is just fuck, man. It really is an existential crisis.
Yeah, not like that it's relying on the audience's feedback. That's important, but just knowing there would always be that doubt that you busted your ass to create it. I don't know. It's so weird, and it feels like this futile feeling sometimes when you're working on stuff. Like, in 5 years, is there going to be a demarcation point where like there's a before and after of it's just
it seems like we're past
the essence of a book. I don't even know how to verbalize it. Like
I know exactly what you're saying.
The meaning of a book,
yeah,
will it diminish now because it's just like, oh, the effort level. This is just a small example. I took the last novel I was working on. I was trying to write this book about growing up in Levittown and all the people I met along the way and the funny stories that happen and the craziness. And I put some chapter into ChatGPT. I refuse to ever have anything AI related, like write anything for me. It's just this like line in the sand that I don't cross. I use it for research and stuff. But I fed it something just to, I don't even know what I was trying to do. I fed it a chapter to find something which I normally don't do, and it gave me back this incredible analysis of the themes of the various paragraphs that were connected in a way that I had no idea about. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah, there's like themes subconsciously that I was working at that I haven't connected yet, that I would probably take 3 drafts additional to find. and it found it, and I was like, this is so dangerous because that could be very addicting. That's what I'm saying. If you just like kept fed it a draft and it found all these themes and then you could edit it from there, and it's not you anymore. It's like,
as amazing as it is, through my research on my show, we mostly talk about philosophy and religion, and I use it a lot for religious. So the Talmud is this extremely long Jewish text, and I'm able to get information from it through ChatGPT. DeepSeek, I was making a video about Christianity in World War II, pre-World War II Germany. It's this big contentious debate. Are they Christian, positive Christianity, which was basically Jesus is an Aryan and he hated the Israelites, or were they secretly atheists? And that's the debate. There's propaganda that says that they were all secretly atheists. And then I had a scholar that wrote a whole thing about how he proved, according to him, that they were genuinely Christian. They just had this racist Christianity. And so I wanted to get all the quotes from Goebbels and all of them talking about what they actually believed from this book called Table Talks. DeepSeek, the Chinese language model, literally gave me 2 quotes that do not exist. I asked DeepSeek again to verify this. It's like, oh, sorry, that was wrong. I'm like, are you serious? I had made a video proudly. I'm like, look at this quote. Goebbels said in 1941, I made an ass of myself. Luckily, like 5 people saw it before I deleted it. But like, we're still at the point where it just makes shit up. You don't know if it's real. So what I do now is I ask 3 language models. I go, is this right? Is that? And it takes like 6 times before they all agree. And so by no means has AI replaced the human brain. And the one thing I've learned is it works best with us. What we have, it doesn't have yet. Maybe one day it will. But right now, at a certain point, you can use it to make your work better. Maybe one day will be obsolete, but you can still make using it for your benefit. I wouldn't get it's like, when you're singing and you worry about, oh, I don't want to use autotune because then people might think I suck. And then it comes to a point where it's like, okay, well, everyone else is using it. It's a very similar argument. And at the end of the day,
it's going to follow the same path of auto-tune probably in music. You're right.
And it's at a certain point. Well, now it's at a point where you don't even have to sing. You just make the thing. But at a certain point, the solution is always to sort of use it. And the one thing AI does not have is identity yet. Maybe one day it will. But right now, the AI cannot do what Kanye West is doing right now. Kanye West has a brand, an identity, a face, an identity that AI doesn't know how to do yet.
I hear that.
It knows how to take Kanye West's identity and make a bluegrass version of the song he made, but it can't make a Kanye West. And there's something about identity that humans will react to for a while that will never totally reach obsolescence. So just remember, you have an identity.
Right now. Yeah. Right now.
You have an identity. The AI doesn't. So
right now,
don't worry about
when I'm 65. There's going to be clones of me on billboards and fucking little weird versions running around. I'm just baffled sometimes, especially when I have like 2 glasses of wine with my wife. That like I think clearly sometimes is not a good habit to get into. But all the bullshit kind of just filters out in the stories you tell yourself, and then it hits me like a truck. Like, I just can't believe, like, all the AI nerds guys, I can't believe they're given probably the most impactful decisions of our lifetimes that are going to pan out in certain ways that are going to impact us so much. They're given just free reign, no guardrails, just zooming towards the singularity with no oversight, and they're like 18 months behind. Like, that was a figure from a while ago. It's probably much worse. I think it was 2 years ago I heard the safety protocols were 18 months in a lag behind development. So like what they make now, they figure out in 18 months, what the hell are the repercussions and the fallout. It just shocks me sometimes that they're flying speed ahead and we're just like playing catch up.
Because they're competing. They're competing. It's the same thing with weaponry. Morals go out the window when you're competing. If you're trying to win a war, you can't be super moral and win the war. And it's the same thing with business. If you have a taco shop and I have a taco shop and I'm being moral, I have a disadvantage unless that morality is being rewarded. If everyone sees that I'm being moral, I might get more customers or something. But at the end of the day, this Palantir thing is a result of people. They need to be the most powerful thing. And so you mentioned Google has an unimaginable amount of information. Alexa and Amazon's information is unimaginable. Palantir is now going to establish the sort of digital fascism that only movies could imagine. China already has a social credit score system. Their data collection is extreme. Every word spoken in that country is recorded and processed by their information. DeepSeek is now extracting information from around the world for China. And so then one day someone could unite all of these horrible dystopian or transcending Orwellian. I don't want to use the word Orwellian because we're beyond that. I'm sure there's some other author with a more dystopian thing. But like, it's only going to get even crazier. And it's like no one's going to create the disadvantage for themselves by genuinely being moral, slowing down. Then you lose the race. And so they're racing. And that's why we're, I don't know.
That's not so crazy to me. It's just that there are no one's got the rules for the race.
Yeah.
And we're just like, yeah, go for it. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. Meanwhile, just to like take out a lease for a car is like, it's, like a whole, it takes like 3 days of insanity and protocols and paperwork to like get some basic stuff done. But these AI guys who are going to have the greatest implications on our future, just go for it. When I watch Sam Altman videos, my skin crawls. That guy freaks me out. Not a big fan.
It's always curious to wonder how much does our government know, because they could be insecure about how little they know.
Yeah.
The Bob Lazar thing could be true. And then that could be the extent of it. They just know they exist. There's all these crazy, I never buy the theory that like, you see these guys claim that the government is like collaborating. I saw some guys say that the government had a contract with the aliens. Like anything like that just doesn't sound plausible. To me, the most plausible theory is that they are this superior being, as superior as we are to chimpanzees, not so that they're godlike, but just seeing the exponential growth of our own society within the last 10 years, it's easy to see that they are quite possibly well beyond us, to where they're fully integrated with computers. So they don't look into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
There's ChatGPT times 1 million in their head, and they have telepathy, and they're just that next step. Just like a chimpanzee would be in awe to see a 747 Boeing jet or AI or a television. To me, that they can't be this evil race of nefarious, sinister demons. They would have done something absolutely horrible.
Yeah, that's the
at this
thing.
point.
Can I ask you something you can edit out if you want?
Go ahead.
Did you ever do ayahuasca or DMT?
I never did ayahuasca. I tried to smoke DMT, and I think I was lied to by a guy that sold. And so I never had this transcendental experience. I wish I did.
Sometimes I feel like there's like this overlap, and sometimes I think that there might be some like aspect of consciousness that some overlap between what's happening with DMT and remote viewing and this and sightings, and like you said about artists, that people are more in tune with the creative world, that are more that are gonna be in touch with this more. I don't know. I'm just.
And they would also
I've been
be more
fascinated.
fascinated. They would be more fascinating to these creatures.
Yeah.
Like the guy that's the best at math is not going to be as interesting to them because they have better math. What's going to be interesting to them is a guy like David Bowie, who has, like I said earlier, what does AI not have? Identity. And so they seem to go after people that have identity. They like that quality that is novel. They can't never reaches obsolescence.
Yeah.
Elvis Presley is an identity. There's nothing I can type in to get that.
Right. It's a good point.
Yeah. There's something about that character that certain people have that I think attracts these beings. That's more interesting.
I definitely have friends of mine who are so normie that they're not getting visited by a fucking alien. There's no way. Just too literal thinking. Nothing wrong with that. I have a lot of creative friends. I got a lot of out there friends. I got some normie friends like anybody, and I got math-minded friends who are so literal that you kind of want to dose them with something just to get them out of their own paradigm.
They'd probably have a panic attack and jump off.
Yeah, they'd break down, but who knows? Maybe they'd cut a hole in the tent of their consciousness and see that there's a lot more out there.
You know, if
Yeah,
the whole world was just creative, out there people, it wouldn't function. So at the end of the day,
That's
we
true.
need someone to count the potatoes, you know?
You need the normies. That is true. We would not get anything done. Yeah, just like to get into a cliched, my own psychedelic experiences when I was younger, for sure, made me realize this is like precarious territory to speak. Not
Go
like
for
a
it,
stoner. Not like a stoner. And
Go for it, man.
an Arrowwood.
Dude, man.
An Arrowwood report. Yeah. Like, you realize there's stuff outside of the tent. You're in the tent forever. There's something out there. I only saw it a few times, but that can change your whole paradigm. And good books can change your whole paradigm. There's a one of them that cracked my mind open was Tom O'Neill's Chaos, for sure. That book's amazing. And I'm not into the Charles Manson. That book's about Charles Manson on the surface. I had and have little interest in the story of that on the surface and the murders and Sharon Tate and all that stuff. It's
but the MK Ultra thing is really interesting.
But that book is unbelievable. Where he doesn't tie everything together. It's a 20-year research project in a book form. He had help with it, but it's a testament to when you finish reading that, you're like, nothing is real. It's one of those books.
You're hitting on something that I actually made a video earlier that I didn't post, and it's like, I've spoken to some of the smartest people in the world. I've spoken to scholars. I know guys that are smart in this sort of way that gets you successful, like financially just brilliant people. Like, I've spoken to all kinds of different kinds of intelligent people. And one thing I learned from speaking to some of the top echelon of intelligence, what they do have is bias. So, and they all have their own bias. And so what I realized, I used to get frustrated when I would speak to the common man and try to get information into them. I try to present information, figure out what is the right way to pitch this, what charisma, what sort of sales pitch can get the truth into someone's brain. I know something, I can prove it. How can I get someone to really take it in? And I noticed that I used to think, oh, people are so stupid that they can't fathom this. They can't. And then when I speak to really smart people, I realize they're also stubborn. So there's guys that they have a bias, they have a perspective, and they're smarter than me. They're smarter than anyone, but there's certain information. Like Ben Shapiro do you know who Ben Shapiro is? He's smarter than me. He can recall information better than me, process information. If we took an IQ test, I would guarantee he would beat me. But if I present him information that his religion is absurd, his perspective will never allow that information in. It doesn't matter how smart he is, his bias is there. And what I learned is dumb people have that too. And so the reason dumb people are being stubborn is it's not that they're unable to process information. They don't want the information. If I'm a salesman and I'm selling someone water, one guy is super thirsty and has no water. The other guy owns a water company. It doesn't matter how charismatic, what data I have to present to the guy. He doesn't want my water. He has his own water company. There's nothing I can say that will break his bias. And when you take certain drugs or you have an experience, a near-death experience, a sexual experience, something that shatters your ego or your perspective, that's one of the only things that could break someone out of these we get into these paradigms. I've had them. I went to Catholic school as a kid. I used to pray to a thing that now I have this podcast where I'm a disbeliever. And there's other example. I used to be a Democrat. I used to think if we could just all vote Democrat, we'd save the world. And then I find out that both of our options are run by the same
What broke your bias in both examples?
I'll tell you what. I know exactly what happened. And this is going to go into a whole...
Open Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look for...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
And we'll be watching. Be safe on the campaign trail. John Kerry, thanks for joining us. And we'll be right back.
Tim Russert, the face of NBC's long-running Meet the Press, has died. NBC News says he had suffered an apparent heart attack.
Think for yourself. Question authority.